want to say something in general on Book 10. That is the first book where we really encourage children to reason about numbers and to engage with numbers in a very creative way. I will say more about that in the written guide. The first task, I have to be honest that I included this task because I like this joke. So this is simply to find a mistake in every one of the number sequences and to suggest something that will turn that into a number sequence that you can extend. The second page, some of the parents might find this a challenge, so we include this and I will write more about that in the guide, but that is one of the very creative and challenging tasks. On page 4, the purpose of that, the intent, the mathematical intent of that task, of that whole page, is to make children aware of the structure of prime numbers as opposed to the composite numbers, the numbers that can, I think the English word is composite numbers, the numbers that have more than 2 factors, because those numbers you can represent in a rectangle or in a rectangular grid. But the prime numbers can only be represented in one long row or one single row that can't be repeated because they have only 2 factors themselves and 1. Then on page 5, we revisit the idea of multiples of certain numbers and more specifically the common multiples, because we give them a grid, a number block, where they've got to scratch out all the multiples of 2 and then all the multiples of 3. And we ask if there are multiples of 4 left, but there won't be, because if you have already scratched out the multiples of 2, you have necessarily scratched out the multiples of 4 already. And we apply the same thing to the other numbers, and I will write more about that in the guide. On page 6, we talk about number stories because we try to make it colorful. We have this grid where they've got to color the first 100 blocks and then 20 blocks in a different color and 4 blocks in another color. And then we ask them to talk about these number stories where they can see how a 3-digit number is actually composed of hundreds, tens, and units, and that can be seen on that grid. Then there are quite a number of tasks that are repetitive, the tasks that we have already done in some of the previous books. And then when you get to page 16, we have a new kind of task where we have some number expressions in the middle, and some of them are equivalent. I notice immediately we have 5 times 4, 2 times 10, 10 plus 10, 10 times 2 that are all equal. Those are the ones that I can just pick up from sight that are equal to 20. And we must try to find a picture that are also 20. Now there are 2 10s, there are 2 10s, that is 1 10 and another 10, so that is another one. So all of those pictures are equivalent, and we want to use arrows to match the expressions to the grids. I will give the answers in the guide. Here we try to expose them to multiplication of double-digit numbers in a different way. We start off with counting in 6s, and then we have 2 tables that they've got to complete, which should be easy after they've done that. And then we ask them to use the tables to find the questions of some multiplications by 6. So this one, if we look at 49 times 6, they can find the cost of 9 pancakes in the table and the cost of 40. So 49 times 6 is the same as 40 times 6 plus 9 times 6, which is the principle that we use in multiplication of double-digit numbers. On page 20, we've got a new interesting relationship, which is called an indirect proportion. We start off making them familiar with the factors of 24, what can divide into 24, and then we divide 24 toffees by those numbers of children. And the reason why it's indirect proportion is that the more children you have, the less toffees they will get. And if we try to represent that as a block tower, which we ask them to do on the next page, you will have the shape that goes steeply down and then gradually towards that axis. And some of you might recognize this as a hyperbola. So we already exposed them to that. The middle pages bring us to some games where they will need dice and other markers. This you might recognize as snakes and ladders, and this is the old traditional noughts and crosses. The rest of the book is just the traditional stuff, but on page 31 we ask them to complete these two very classic mathematical patterns, Pascal's triangle and the Fibonacci.